Hello, greetings. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so bear with me if I feel really strange and awkward at times. Also, I don't know if you can hear the strange construction noises occurring outside, but just leave those in any case. But yeah, no, today I'm gonna kind of casually talk about my most recent Vipassana retreat, my third 10-day Vipassana course, which I did in the second half of September at Dhamma Pasava in Lava Hot Springs, Idaho. And I'm not really using any notes this time around, so we're just kind of gonna feel it out, and I'm just gonna kind of talk about whatever. Um, I put a link to some of the past rants I've done, which have all been really long and very detailed. And so, in the effort of being shorter and perhaps more succinct and efficient, this one I'm gonna just try to make a little more casually. So anyway, it's been a long road. It's been a really long road. My first course was in 2018 in March, and then my second one was in 2019 in August, so a little over a year ago. And then in January of 2020, I served a course. So once you've sat on a Vipassana retreat, you have the option of serving. Until you've sat a 10-day course, you cannot serve or do any of the other courses. There's shorter courses and longer courses and stuff. But once you have sat a course and been through the whole thing, you can now pay it forward, essentially. And so in January of this year, that's pretty much what I did. I volunteered. I was like, hey, I want to pay it forward and support others to receive this technique, this Dhamma. Um, Side note, the literal translation of Dhamma, or Dharma in some forms of in other forms of Buddhism, is the way, or the law, or the universal law, or nature. So it's sort of the natural law that things follow. And so what Vipassana is essentially it's a technique to discover what the natural law is, and then to live by it. So most people who practice Vipassana find it easier to sort of live from a place of goodwill and from a place of joy, because they've experienced this natural law within the framework of themselves. If I act negatively towards others, or if I react negatively towards internal or external stimuli, I'll produce misery. And so once you've experienced that, you start to come out of reaction and start to come out of these habits of negativity. And so that's what we mean sort of by discovering the law. Now, one of the big things on this course for me was, and recently in my life, has been thinking about how there's three different kinds of wisdom. And I kind of mentioned this in the description of this video. There's three different kinds of wisdom. There's Sotamayapanya, which is the wisdom like you read something in a book and you believe it. Sounds about right. Yeah, that's maybe a form of wisdom. Then after that comes Gentamayapanya, which is when you've heard someone talk about it, like for example, some guy on Facebook Live, or perhaps a renowned speaker, or someone of that nature. And you've heard someone speak about it, and you accept that wisdom based on the authority that you've placed in that person. Those are the first two forms of wisdom. And the third form of wisdom is the wisdom that you've lived and that you've experienced. And so only the third, only the third type is real wisdom. Now, you can't understand true wisdom without living it. And so this is a thing I've been noticing in my life so much in the past couple of years. It's like thoughts kind of just emerge from the surface, and you can like play intellectual games with them. You can say, oh, well, what if this, what if that, and you can kind of logically come to a solution to your thoughts. But that isn't really what solves the problem of, for example, negativity, and it won't take you deeper into the mind and deeper into your experience to just kind of play logical games all day. You can't just like figure out your life on an intellectual level. Instead, thoughts are just a manifestation of what you're already experiencing on a deeper level. And so if you don't react to thoughts, and if you don't try to play these intellectual games and figure everything out, it's ironically, what ends up happening is you deepen your experience, you go to a deeper level, And through this non-reaction, you sort of kind of figure out the questions. So I've been going in many tangents for a minute here, but I will, just to finish this thought though, in Zen Buddhism, Zen is famous for just trying to sort of exhaust the meditator. Meditators are given koans, which are kind of like unsolvable riddles that don't really make any sense. The famous one is like, if a tree falls in the middle of the woods and no one's around, does it make a sound? And there's no logical answer to this. And so the point of Zen meditation is you're trying to figure it out until you're just so exhausted and broken and frustrated that you've broken through. And you no longer have this dualistic way of thinking that means the riddle can't be solved. And so by kind of breaking your mind, you reach sort of a unified understanding of the riddle or the koan, and from that you kind of progress spiritually. Now, I am not a Zen Buddhist, but that's just sort of an example of this idea that thoughts are really just a reflection of what's going on deeper inside. So the things rising to the surface in your mind, you can't really solve by just creating other thoughts and other thoughts. It's just this constant chatter that doesn't ever lead anywhere. And so one thing that we practice in meditation is, again, kind of that non-reaction. And to go full circle on this, it goes back to those three different kinds of wisdom. You can't solve it by reading about it. You can't solve it by hearing someone else talk about it. The only way to solve this is by deepening your own experience and experiencing the answer. You don't even have to think of the answer, because the answer's not a thought. You experience a truth deeper inside of you, from which peace arises and from which the answer arises, so to speak. Anyway, that was a really long rant, but that's one thing that I'll probably be coming back to. In any case, I served a course in January of 2020 this year. And so serving is very, very different from sitting on a Vipassana course. As I'll kind of talk about, sitting on a course is like a mental operation. You're just like ripping your brain to shreds, essentially, and trying to like go deeper in there, and like it's a very painful process. But in that process, you let go of a lot of the deeper bound negativities, and so it kind of purifies you on the surface level as well, kind of like I was just saying. Serving is very different. Serving is a very joyful practice. You're not just trying to shred your mind, but instead you're trying to help and support those who are. And you're trying to kind of make it possible for them to have a peaceful and as good of an experience as possible. And because of that, you really are focused on the volition in your actions when you serve. And I made a whole long ranty video in the series. That's part 4. Check it out if you're interested. Serving is great. It just fills you with love and joy. But the point of that, the reason I mention it, is since doing that, my practice has been very, very strong. Since January of this year, I've been meditating consistently for 2 hours every single day. 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour at 5:30 p.m. in the evening. If I ever cancel plans on you at around 5 or 5:30, it's because I'm going home to meditate. And I am very firm on that. It's a boundary that, like, I'm not going to miss my meditation. It's kind of end of story. And then, we can hang out at 7 or whatever. But yeah, so I've been doing that every single day for, I guess it's almost 9 or 10 months now. And so my practice has been very, very strong. But, all the same, it's kind of recommended, so to speak, that you sit one 10-day course every year. Serving's great too, but to actually sit and meditate on one. And so it had been about a year since my course in August 2019, and I kind of noticed negativity starting to creep back into my life sometime during the summer. And what that means for me, for example, it's not just meditating 2 hours every day. Meditating 2 hours every day is a big thing, but I've also been a vegetarian for well over a year. I've been sober for well over a year. I've been, trying not to speak any lies for well over a year, and trying to practice healthy relationships, especially with regard to sexuality and sexual relationships and stuff. And so all of these things are easy if you're not very negative, It just kind of happens intuitively, like, oh yeah, it's easy to live a good, healthy life when you're feeling good. But once negativity starts forming kind of deep down below the surface, it starts getting harder. And so sometime around July, I noticed myself, oh, I really want to eat meat. I didn't eat meat. Eventually I had meat for like one meal. That's a different story. But they messed up my order, and I didn't want to like go back and fix it. But it was not a big deal. But in any case, no, around July, August, I started finding it more difficult to like, these cravings started coming up to the surface, like, oh, I kind of want to eat meat. You know, I kind of want to use some sort of substance. Thankfully, I did not do any of that. And that's an easier one for me to commit to, just because it's like, you know, you would have to go to quite a bit of effort to do that. In any case, yeah, and I found myself having, you know, certain cravings in terms of relationships and, you know, all sorts of stuff. So in any case, I noticed myself a little more negative around July and August, which had been about a year since my previous course, so it was about time for me to go again. Now, of course, COVID has been kind of, you know, closed down the world for most of 2020. And so it's funny, the moment that COVID started, I was like, now would be the perfect time to go on a meditation retreat, because these retreats are held in pretty remote places. And you just kind of, you're isolated there and you just meditate all day. It's great. You know, like, they take your phone, you have no technology of any kind. You don't even have books, reading, or writing materials. No, literally nothing. I had my watch. That's about the most advanced piece of technology I had. And that's kind of how I do these retreats, and that's how many would recommend doing it. And yeah, and you meditate about 12 hours a day. It's pretty much all you do. You get up at 4 a.m., start meditating at 4:30, just breakfast at 6:30, and you meditate till around 11, then there's lunch, then you have a break, then you meditate from 1 to 5, there's a short break at 5 to 6, you can have some tea, and then you meditate kind of for the rest of the night, lights out at, you go to bed around 9. So all you do every day is meditate, pretty much. Which is great, because when that is the situation you're in, you want to meditate. You know, it's like there's nothing else to. It's like, if I don't want to meditate right now, like, what else am I gonna do? You know, because there is nothing else to do. You don't have a phone. You don't have books. You know, like, so it's really good the way that they set up the courses in that sense, because yeah, like, it forces you to meditate. Like, there's no other way to do it. Now, as a returning student, you fast from lunch till breakfast. So you fast from about 11:30 a.m. till 6:30 a.m. the next day. And the interesting thing about these retreats is, once you're kind of inward, you don't really have much of a focus or a craving or any of that sort for food. And so I would eat just these tiny meals, maybe like 5 or 6 bites of food, maybe like 10 bites of food. And then I'd be done. And the thing is, because you're fasting, you're gonna get hungry anyway. So there's not really a point to eating this big, you know, huge meal that's just you're gonna be hungry anyway. And also it'll kind of get in the way of your mental clarity if your stomach is really full. It's actually really hard to meditate on a full stomach. So if anyone's trying to work their own home practice, I would highly recommend don't practice right after a meal. Try to wait like half an hour to an hour. Side note. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah. So, so like negativity had kind of crept back into my life, and COVID was happening. So for a while, these retreats weren't happening. I wanted to do this course probably sometime around June or July, but none were really happening. And then I started a summer job and stuff, which ended in mid-August. And then I applied to this course, which was in mid-September, and I got waitlisted, and then I got in. Quite probably because I had served, because I think they prioritize people who have served courses on the wait list. In any case, I kind of figured out how to get on this course. It was all the way across the country. I was living in Connecticut. The course was in Idaho. But I was trying to move west at the same time. I didn't want to live in Connecticut anymore. So what ended up happening was I kind of packed I first figured out my living arrangements, where I'm currently living. And then I was like, yeah, we can make this happen. So I drove about 2,200 miles over 3 days to get to the course. And then I sat the course. And then after the course, sorry, I talk about things in a very ranty, weird pathway. But after the course, I went up to Bozeman, Montana, which was kind of in the area. Because I'd never been to Montana. It was the 45th state that I've been to. So I'm trying to get to the last 5 soon. And then from there, I went to Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons. I kind of like drove past the Grand Tetons. I was going to spend more time there, and then it's a long story. We're not going to talk about that. But then I went down to Salt Lake City, hung out and stayed with some of the people who I connected with on the course, and then also a past coworker. It was good to see this coworker of mine. We had hung out and like met over Zoom so many times because I was working there during the pandemic, but we had never met in person. So I was like, "Hey man, like I'm in Salt Lake, and I need a place to stay." And so we met up and we hung out and stuff, and I could crash there, which I'm very grateful for. So yeah, that's kind of how it's been. And then from Salt Lake, I came down back to Denver, where I'm currently living. So that's kind of the story of how I got on the course. I'm trying to think if there's any other details there. Yeah, no, it's just that I had been practicing consistently for a long time, and that even with that, over time, kind of negativity does start to arise. You know, it takes a while, but after, like, starting around maybe July-ish, my meditation practice at home wasn't very good. I wasn't getting very much out of it. I would put in the time still, and I was consistently doing it, but the actual meditation sessions were like pretty dull, so to speak. I wasn't really feeling very much. I wasn't, my awareness wasn't very good. And that just kind of happens, you know, after a course, you know, at the end of a course you're here, and then slowly over the time, you know, you get down to here. And so the goal is to kind of get back up and get your practice inspired again, and that's why you go on another course around once a year. That's usually enough. Serving helps so much too with that sort of thing. So yeah, that's kind of the background of how I got to the course and what my life is kind of looks like. I guess I can talk about the course a bunch, because that is, after all, what we're the, sort of the central act of this little ranty video. See, in the past I've really ranted extensively of like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And I don't really want to do that this time, and I haven't really been feeling the desire to do that recently, because that's not the point, you know. It's not, oh, and then I felt this, and then I felt that. Instead, it's about kind of getting to that deeper space that I was briefly mentioning before, when you're experiencing wisdom, not just thinking about wisdom, not just hearing about it or reading about it, you're actually experiencing it. And so the beauty of Vipassana as a technique, and actually I'll talk about the technique a little bit, the beauty of Vipassana as a technique is it brings you to that deeper place within yourself from whence you can experience true wisdom and live it and not just think about it. Because I think so often in our lives, you know, we think we can get just an intellectual solution, or, you know, we set an intention in one direction. I will not do this, I will not do that. But it's really hard to actually practice. I mean, sure, it is practice, but if nothing has changed inside of you, then it's hard to manifest changes in your external world. So all this is about is really manifesting the change first inside yourself, and then kind of the world fixes itself, which is great. Now, how do you do that? Well, that's where Vipassana comes in. So the technique of Vipassana, you know, there's so many different meditation techniques. Vipassana is, in a way it's simple, and in a way it's complex. It's simple in the sense that all you're doing is just moving the point of focus around the body. And it's simple in the sense that you're just dealing with reality. Now, it's complex in the sense that it's complex in the sense that what you find is probably not what you would expect. Now, this is a technique designed to take you to the subtlest level of reality, which we've actually become so disconnected from that we don't even really know what it feels like. And that's why Vipassana is very much kind of an exploratory type of meditation. Like the way you're sitting there, it's almost like spontaneously things are happening and you just observe. So to begin a retreat, you start with Anapana meditation. You don't start with Vipassana. Anapana is just single point of focus on the breath. You're paying attention to the air flowing in and the air flowing out. And so what this does is it sharpens your mind such that you can eventually see the deeper levels of the mind. Then on the fourth day of the course, you begin Vipassana. And so instead of just holding your attention here all the time, now you start moving it systematically all over the entire body. And the entire body. You don't ignore a single bit, which is really important, because what ends up happening is when you're sitting there for an hour or 2 hours or however many hours, when you're doing it all day every day, the body starts to be, it can get a little hostile, so to speak. A lot of pain starts coming to the surface. And so what ends up happening is, say there's a pain in your shoulder, but your focus isn't on your shoulder, you're focused right now on your head, and so this pain is coming out and it's coming out and it's trying to grab your attention, but no, you're just going along up here. You'll get to the shoulder when you get to it. And so this is how you practice equanimity on a sort of on whatever level of the mind you're at. And it takes you to a subtler level, because instead of focusing on the gross, apparent, painful reality of your shoulder, you're focused on a subtler aspect of reality in your head, in this example, or wherever your focus is. Now, eventually you do observe the shoulder, but you observe it as you would anything else. You don't treat it specially just because it's trying to grab your attention, but instead it's all the same. No reaction to anything, no matter how strong or powerful and painful a sensation may be, you don't react to it. And then on the opposite side of things, no matter how pleasurable or enjoyable a sensation is, you don't react to that either. So the point is, we're going to subtler levels of the brain, and these things are manifesting as sensations on the body. Our past reaction patterns, deeper down within our minds that we don't really usually get to work on, they start to come to the surface. And reaction patterns in the past where we had been where we had had aversion towards something, where we had hated or rejected something, it comes to the surface and it's a painful sensation. You want to reject the painful sensation, but you don't, because that's not where your focus is. You're focused over here. And you just keep focusing and treating it normally. No reaction. The same is true. There's deep-rooted habit patterns in our mind of craving and of wanting certain things to happen. And so these can manifest as very pleasurable sensations on the body. But once more, you don't react. You just let them be, and you come out of them that way. So you don't say, oh yes, this is so good, I want this, which is what you've always done in the past. But instead, you just leave it be, and no reaction. And so in this way, you're freed of your cravings and of your aversions, which is sort of what, in turn, makes you a more peaceful person. Your equanimity. Equanimity not at the surface level of the mind, where everything's constantly changing anyway, but equanimity at the depth of the mind. If you're at your core, if you're a very peaceful person, what happens on the surface doesn't matter. So the point of the technique is really to take you to that depth of the mind and then to practice equanimity there, and all along the way as well. And this is what they mean by purifying the mind. Vipassana is absolutely a technique to purify your mind. I say it like that. I don't mean this in a facetious way. No. It's how you purify the mind. So, what was I saying? Yes. Yes, so that's kind of the technique and how the retreats go. I'll briefly tell you about some of the things I felt on this recent course. So my first course and my second course, going in, I had a lot of fear. Even my second course, the second time around, I was pretty scared going in. I was like, I did it once, but can I do it again? Because I knew it was going to be really hard. Those first two courses, very, very hard. This third course, very, 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 very hard. Probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I actually talked to some of the older students who had been on many, many courses, and I was like, why does it get harder every time? And they're like, good, that means you're going deeper. That means you're working hard. And so that dealt with a lot of doubt that had arisen in my mind, like, I must be doing this wrong if it's just getting harder, right? But no, it's kind of meant to get harder. There's no easy way out of this sort of self-purification thing, because it runs so deeply. Our reactions run so deeply in our minds, and if we never experienced deep and intense pain and also pleasure, we would never be able to come to terms with it and, with wisdom, not react to it. So anyway, coming into this third course, I wasn't nearly as fearful because I had done it twice, and I knew that even though it would be hard, that I would be able to do it. Because at this point, I was pretty confident too, because I'd been practicing for every day for like 9 months or whatever, and so that gave me a lot of confidence. I was like, yeah, Vipassana, I got this, yeah. But of course, then once I get there and I start meditating, it's like doing it 2 hours a day is great, but doing it 11 hours a day, it's hard. It's really, really hard. Pretty much no matter which way you spin it, because it's like over time you are going deeper. Like I said before, like the only thing you can do on these retreats is meditate, because what else are you going to do? There's no technology or anything. And similarly, you only can go inward, and you only can go deeper. There's nothing else for your brain to do. You can't talk to anyone. I don't think I mentioned that. You can't even look at people, so the only direction is inward, and that's good, but it's hard, and so by doing that for like 10 hours on the first day, and then 10 hours on the second day, and then 10, by day 4, I was like, oh my god, which is kind of how it always goes, to be completely honest. And again, it's a good thing, because now you have an option to work at the deeper level. You're not just gonna try to fix stuff on the surface. No, you're actually gonna do the deep work, the hard work, or the heart work, as I like to say. So the first 3-4 days, so in terms of what I personally felt during those days, I kind of expected it at this point, because I've felt it before on this process, this hike inward, so to speak. You see the same things, and I've done this before, and so I kind of anticipated that I would feel, for example, a lot of self-hatred, and a lot of thoughts of self-harm, and a lot of, lust, and a lot of anger, and that's sort of what's coming to the surface as you're going deeper in the brain. And that's natural, because quite honestly, that's what's, at least in my case, that's what's in my brain, towards the more surface levels. And so as I'm kind of going in, that's pretty much what I see every time, and it kind of sucks, but over time you kind of get used to it, and you're like, oh, it's just self-hatred, whatever, you kind of stop caring, which is good. There's not really I don't think there's a better way to deal with that, to be honest. But in any case, then on day 4, you start Vipassana. So the first 3 days are just Anapana meditation. The 4th day is when you begin moving the point of focus around the body, practicing Vipassana. And literal translation of Vipassana, there's a few. It's sometimes called insight meditation. It's sometimes called body scanning, just because of kind of how it works. But the word Vipassana itself actually just means to observe reality as it is objectively. And that's all you're doing. And as you go deeper into the mind, you start to experience reality on a level that you're not really familiar with, because you're experiencing kind of the unconscious mind, and you're working with the unconscious mind, and you're begging the unconscious mind to stop giving you such a freaking hard time. Oh man, because it gets very, 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 very painful to go in there and do that. Now the alternative is to just let it be unconscious, and that's probably the path that most people take in our modern world. And for that, the saying is ignorance is bliss. And I can't, I would love if everyone did this inner work and healed themselves. But I also understand that it's hard, and that a lot of people probably don't want or need to experience this really intense depth of the mind, because it is really uncomfortable. It is really uncomfortable to kind of go through this sort of thing. I would just argue that you're not going to have a long-term healing of yourself unless you experience your most fundamental realities. You know, you can't fix things just by working at the surface level. So that's why I'm always encouraging people to like begin doing mindfulness and you know, to start going inward. It literally saved my life when somebody told me to do that. So I just try to pay it forward now, you know. So if anyone's, you know, watching and thinking about trying to actually have a healing process that actually that works on a deeper level and isn't just gonna like blow away with the winds, because a lot of forms of meditation, like, they'll focus you and they'll make you feel good, but then 3 days later you're just back to where you started. Vipassana is actually the one technique that I've found that has kind of lasting results. Because of how it works, you are going to that deeper level and you're healing yourself there. You're not just working with things on the surface. Like I said, I'm kind of ranting about this without notes and going in many, many directions, but that's okay. So day 4, you start practicing Vipassana. You practice Vipassana for about 6 days, 10, 11 hours a day. And, you know, it is painful, but it's really only painful at first, because in Vipassana, what you're really observing is change. I mentioned that the word means to observe objectively. And so by moving around over and over and over again, each time it's a little different, you know, and what you end up noticing is that all sensations change. They all have this characteristic. It doesn't matter if they're very pleasant or if they're very painful. And so you gain an experiential wisdom, an experiential understanding that all things change. It's very easy to intellectually understand, oh yeah, all things change, of course, duh, you know, and it's very easy to like read about it, oh yeah, all things change, of course. But to actually experience it in the framework of your own body, very few people actually do. Because part of the question is like, how do we do that? You know, our culture is so disconnected from our own kind of physical beings, and we're not really present to our own sensations most of the time. And so we need sort of a way to get back in touch with that, to experience the truth that all things change. And so this is what you're doing and what you're learning on a Vipassana course. The other thing you're learning is how to meditate in the tradition of Vipassana. So that's what you start doing. And so the point I was going to make there, so at first it's very painful, but you just try to stick through the pain, because eventually the pain will change, because all things change. And so one thing that happened, so my first 2 courses, I pretty much only felt pain, you know, like it was very uncomfortable, to say the least, at a very intense level. But it's sort of a thing in this technique. You're paying attention to change so much that you can kind of dissect the pain and pull it apart and observe it. And when you do that, you start to notice that it's actually changing at a very, 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 very fast level. And it's actually all the physical structure is just made out of very subtle vibrations. It's like underlying the pain and every other sensation that you feel is a very, very subtle flow of energy that's very rapid, very, very extremely rapid, and very, very constantly changing. And so on this retreat, I started to feel that, and it was kind of bizarre at first, because it's like you sit through all this pain for so long, and suddenly all this really intense pain just becomes immensely pleasurable. You know, it's like there was a burning in your arms and your shoulders and legs and stuff. And now that you've dissected it and you've noticed the subtler reality that is just constantly changing very, very rapidly, it becomes very, very enjoyable. And that's sort of what I was talking about before. You don't want to react with craving towards that which is enjoyable, because that's just as bad. You're trying to come out of your old habit patterns of reaction. You're not trying to come out of your pain necessarily, or your pleasure even. You're trying to come out of the part of you that says, oh, pain, oh, no. And you're trying to come out of the part of you that says, oh, pleasure, oh, yes, more of that, less of this. No, stop reacting to the external reality and just stop reacting in general, and that is how you cultivate real peace in your life. by not reacting to that which is bad, but also not reacting to that which is good. And I mean bad and good because, objectively speaking, these sensations, they're neutral. You know, like they maybe feel bad or feel uncomfortable, or maybe they feel good, but sensations don't care. You know, they just arise and pass away. That's what we're experiencing. All sensations change. So, yeah, so around day 5 or 6, all of my pain started dissolving, which was very strange. But I mean, it was great because I was just happy to not be in pain anymore. You know, it's like you sit through very, very intense pain, and then eventually it's like your body just kind of like it catches on to something subtler than pain that is intensely pleasurable. And so what ended up happening to me is I began to crave that. Now, intellectually, I understand I'm not supposed to crave this, okay? But I hadn't experienced it, and so then it's arising, and I'm going, I don't want to react to this, I don't want to react to this, but it's so great, because I didn't want the freaking pain anymore. The pain sucks. I dissolved my entire body, just free flow everywhere, vibration everywhere, scan the whole body in one breath, scan it again in another breath. You know, that is a level of mental clarity that I've never had before. The way that you scan, so there's this thing in Vipassana that gets a lot of new meditators, and I'm just going to comment on it briefly. There's a state known as bhanga, which is dissolution. And so what happens is your whole body, your whole being, inside, outside, it's all free flow everywhere, just subtle vibrations everywhere, and there's no boundary on it. And so it's insanely pleasurable, as you might imagine. But people mistakenly think that bhanga is the final goal, and so you kind of crave bhanga because you're like, oh, that sounds great. Maybe one day I'll be a great Vipassana meditator, dissolving my existence, and like it's cool, it's fine, whatever. But the point is, bhanga is not like any different than any of the other sensations you're feeling. What it is you're getting this free flow because there's no blockage in your brain. You're not reacting anywhere in your brain, and because of that, reality is just like going crazy and like kind of vibrating off and out of you. But it gets a lot of new meditators because they think that, this is what I should be going for. It's not what you should be going for. I mean, if it happens, great. If it doesn't happen, whatever. So that's bhanga anyway. That's dissolution though. And so when dissolution does happen, meaning there's no blockage anywhere in your mind, and that's manifesting in the body as a free flow of energy everywhere, it's very pleasurable. And how did I want to end that sentence? Oh yeah, it just kind of happens sometimes, but it's not the final goal. It's not total liberation. That's what dissolution is, and that's what dissolution manifests as on the physical level. Because you also realize when you have this no blockage thing going on, you realize that these sensations have nothing to do with me. They don't have anything to do with, they're all totally impermanent. And if I crave or cling to any sensation, it will lead to suffering. And so those are the truths of anatta, insubstantiality, or no ego. So dissolution literally, like, it feels like, oh, where'd my ego go? It's gone. Well, kind of. I don't know if I can say that fairly. But because it's not the total transcendence. It's a temporary, very deep and subtle reality, but it's not the transcendence of reality altogether, which is kind of the goal. That is the reality of mind and matter. You're trying to transcend that to something that is beyond mind and matter. I don't know if what I'm saying is comprehensible or not, but I hope it is. I'm going to keep talking. Anyway, so that's anatta, insubstantiality, no I, no me, no mine, no ego. It's fake. It does not exist. And so that manifests physically as this free flow when there is no blockage whatsoever in your mind. And again, very pleasurable, but very dangerous because it's not the final goal, and you don't want to crave that pleasure. You don't want to crave that sensation. And naturally, as humans, we're programmed such that when a really pleasant sensation arises, we react with craving. It's just kind of how we are. And so you kind of have to go through it to deal with that craving and to come out of that craving. And so that's a big thing that I was dealing with on like days 6 and 7. Now I hadn't experienced it before, and so it was immensely pleasurable, and I did find, like, no matter how hard I was like, I don't want to crave this, I don't want to crave this, I still found myself doing it, because pain sucks, and, you know, blissful, free, vibrational energy is great. It is awesome. But, you know, what ended up happening, though, was I felt myself kind of regress a little bit, which they warn you pretty hard about this, and so I was on the lookout for it. I was like, I know I'm doing something wrong here, but God, it's just so good. And so what ended up happening, though, was by day 8, I stopped having the free flow of energy. I couldn't create it because I was craving and I was resisting the really painful sensations, and of course that just makes them get worse and more painful. And so that was really hard on me mentally, because it was like I had come so far and I just stopped all of a sudden, and it was my own fault that I stopped and like even moved back a little bit, and I was pretty furious with myself. But of course the only option is to keep working, is to keep meditating. And so with new vigilance and with new diligence, I began to meditate, and I was just like, no matter what happens, pleasurable or painful, I do not care. I do not give a shit what sensations arise. I will not react to them. Like, with stronger determination than ever, you know, let's say these subtle vibrations arise again. I don't care. I don't want those, okay? I'm not going to, like, ruin my progress and just give it all up just because it feels good all of a sudden. You know, that's not the point. The point is non-reaction at every level and to every sensation. So that, while it was a very, very painful learning experience, you know, it was nonetheless a very beneficial one, because now that's moving forward, and from that point onward, I've always just kind of felt like I don't care what happens anymore. Like, if it's good, great. If it's bad, whatever. I don't care. Which is a good place to be. And so then naturally my meditations kept getting more and more painful, challenging me at a deeper and deeper level. And so by day 9, I literally, in the evening meditation, I was forcing myself to sit through this pain, like, I don't give a shit, I don't give a shit, I don't give a shit. You know, like gritting my teeth from all the pain while saying, no, I don't care about this, I'm just going to sit here. And I literally had a panic attack while meditating, which was like, that was one of the most painful experiences I've ever had. I, like, you know, all the sensations were the same. I've had a few panic attacks in my life, never while meditating though, and it was just so intense. So that was really hard, but once more, I'm glad that I went through it, and I'm glad that I stuck it out, you know, because this is a big point, and I've taken a very long time to come to it, and I apologize for that, but a big point is just that all these things that are rising to the surface, you're letting go of them when you're on a retreat. Not in daily life. In daily life, you get thoughts, but it's like an echo chamber. They just keep going. On a Vipassana retreat, I'm a firm believer that everything you're feeling, you're letting go of. All this pain, all this aversion, all this, you know, self-hatred or depression, or even joy. You know, joy can be very distracting. On my second retreat, I talk about how, in the video, I talk about how I was having overwhelming experiences of beauty. So much beauty that I couldn't focus. And it was, like, great, but it was also horrible, because, like, I need to be able to focus. You know, like, to truly be peaceful, you need to not be reactive to that sort of thing. That's the bottom line here. And so, thankfully, that, like, you know, you work through all of it. You just keep meditating, and you get to deeper stuff. You know, it doesn't really matter what rises up. It's not going to kill you. I wouldn't recommend leaving a course, because some of the stuff that comes up, you know, on day 5 and day 6 or whatever day it is, you know, some of it's pretty powerful. I've had some really intense thoughts of, like, all sorts of different self-harm and all sorts of... I'm not going to go into it, but, you know, if I had left at that point, then that would have been my mental state going home, and then I would have been in serious danger. But if you stick it out, you work through it. you know, and so that's why it's really, really important that you stick out your retreat if you ever go on one, because you do work through it, and it does get better, as long as you stay. If you don't stay, it's very, very dangerous. Anyway, so there was like one other thing I wanted to mention. So on day 7, so on my past retreats, I been a bit of a crybaby. My first retreat, I just cried and cried and cried. I cried every single day on my first retreat. On my second retreat, I was a lot better about it. I only cried a little bit. And on this course, I was like, I got this. I'm not even crying. On day 5, I hadn't cried yet, and I was like, oh, I'm through the worst of it. Like, I'm not even going to cry on this course. Great. That's a sure sign of progress, or something like that. Side note, there's a saying that if you have never wept deeply, you have never truly meditated. And I think the reason that I wept so deeply on that first course and that second course is it sneaks up on you. Like the way that you've been living for so long, and all of a sudden you discover that it was so wrong, and that you've been creating so much misery for yourself and for other people, continuously, constantly, blindly, even though it wasn't what you consciously wanted to do, you did it anyway, because of all this ignorance. And then when finally you realize that, and you come out of that ignorance, even if it's just for a moment, it's like you weep. That's the only thing to do. Well, maybe other people react differently. But that's how I've always reacted, you know, and going about daily life, it's easy to forget, you know, the truth of reality within ourselves, and about misery and about spreading negativity and stuff. It's easy to forget because as a culture we've forgotten, and there's so many distractions that pull away our attention. That pull away our attention, and that lead us to forget. And so when you finally remember, not just that you should not, you know, create new misery for others, and that you don't want to, and that you're experiencing the truth. When you do remember that, that's great, but you also realize that you've forgotten for so long, and that's why you weep, you know, and or do whatever it is that you do. I don't know. But it's hard, you know, it's a moment of remembering. I will say that keeping up daily practice since my last course in January, I don't really feel like I forgot. You know, I was living a peaceful, harmonious life, you know, living a life of sobriety, of, for the most part, celibacy, with responsible a level of sexual interaction, so pretty much celibacy in a way. That's not a fair comparison, but you get what I mean. You know, not lying to people, not eating meat, not using drugs or, you know, alcohol or anything. For a long time, I've been doing that, and meditating very often, you know, 2 hours every day. So I never really forgot since January. You know, I haven't created a ton of misery in the past year, and it feels really good to say that, because misery for one is misery for all. Is what you come to understand. You know, once I start acting out of my misery, it just spreads to other people. And so that's really the pain for me, is like, I don't really care if I'm a miserable person. There's what's his name? Victor Hugo wrote that melancholy is the joy of being sad. And that's a state that I pretty much live in. I love to be just kind of melancholy. I don't think melancholy is a bad emotion at all, because I live in this state of like, yeah, in a way everything sucks, you know, and I'm fine with that, you know, because it's just me who's experiencing that, and you know, it's not negativity. It really isn't. It's just like viewing the world in such a sense with an understanding that like, yeah, all this is going to change, and like I'd best not get too worked up over it. And so, in any case, what was I going to say? Oh, in any case, I don't really feel like I forgot the truth in the past year, you know, and I don't think I ever in there started creating a lot of misery for myself or for other people. Oh yeah, that was the point. So again, I don't really care if I'm miserable, but causing misery for others, really just wrecks me. I can't do that. I cannot do that. And I can't live with myself when I do that, you know, which is ironic because I do it all the time, but it's hard, you know. That's what it is that's what makes me miserable. It's not the world that makes me miserable. It's when I, in reaction to that, make other people miserable. That's what makes me miserable. It's kind of backwards in a way, but it's like when I realize, oh, I've really hurt this person out of my own ignorance and my own stupidity, you know, and incompetence and unworthiness and all, you know, all the negative stuff. It's when I've hurt another person that it really catches up to me, and I'm like, oh, shoot, you know, like that's when it really hurts me, and I start reacting and self-deprecating and whatever. But so what was I gonna say about that? Sorry, this is a problem with ranting so much. It's fun, but I forget what I was talking about, like, as I'm talking about it. I also got diagnosed with ADHD this year, so that might be part of it. Yeah. I remember. So, yeah, so, like, day 5, I was like, I didn't cry yet. I'm not gonna cry. I got this. It's easy. Day 6, I didn't cry either. But then day 7, what happened was, during one of the meditations, I realized that I need my parents to do a Vipassana course. Because I've understood now that Vipassana is something that has led to me coming out of so much of my own ignorance and my own misery. And spontaneously, the thought arose that I need them to do the same. And it occurred to me that I would do anything to get them on a course because I actually do care about them. That's something I forget sometimes too. Not on the intellectual level, but on the experiential level. And I think a lot of us could say that, so maybe it's not so bad. But it's like this immediate and powerful experience of like, no, I really do love these people, and because of that, I need them to help themselves with something like this, to come out of their own ignorance and to come out of their own misery. I'm of the belief that you can't really change people. People can only change themselves. What you can do is you could say, hey, do a Vipassana course because that's going to help you, you know? And so I realized I will beg them if I need to. And I've told them this, but, you know, and they're open to the idea, it seems. It'll take time, probably, but no matter what happens, I'm going to get them on a course. And if I don't, I'm not going to be able to live with myself, you know, because they need it. Like, at the same time as I'm realizing this, I'm realizing just how much misery they cause themselves and how much misery they cause others in the normal human way that we all do. But, you know, these are people who I care about, and I don't want them to cause misery for themselves and for each other and for those around them. Because of that, I made a strong determination they must go on a Vipassana course, and I will do anything to make that happen. One thing I also want to do is to serve that course, to volunteer on that course, such that I can begin to repay the debt of being a child. You know, that's one thing the Buddha says. He says that we could never repay our debt to our parents, but the closest we can do is to get them established in Dhamma, to get them established in the truth and in the way, and in this meditation to begin to heal themselves. So like I was saying before, you can't change other people, you can't heal other people, but what you can do is you can say, hey, go on a Vipassana course, or hey, you know, maybe stop doing that one thing that you do, or, you know, you get what I mean. So I realized that, and that was when the tears started coming, and I was like, oh man, I didn't want to cry. That's one of the times I cried on this retreat, the first time that I cried on this retreat, and it was like really a powerful experience. And the thing is, there's a discourse every night, and so in the discourse, the meditation teacher talks about different aspects of the philosophy and of the meditation technique and that sort of thing. And that night, he said, I'd heard all these discourses before, of course, but that night, he talks about ehipassiko. The translation of ehipassiko is, come and see for yourself. And pure truth, pure Dhamma, pure liberation just naturally wants itself to be shared. And so one of the points is that you know you've progressed when this feeling arises in you to spread what you've learned, and to get other people on courses and to just help other people such that they can experience it for themselves. Ehipassiko, come and see for yourself. True wisdom and true healing is very generous, just naturally wants to spread to others, and so it spontaneously arises like that. And so that was when I realized, oh crap, like I've really changed these past couple of years, and I've really gotten something out of this, and sometimes I forget that, because it's a lot of work, and at every level you kind of start taking it for granted until you move a little further, and so when you take it for granted, you forget, oh yeah, this is like really important in my life, It's easy to recognize when it shows itself very very visibly, but most of the time it's like, am I actually getting anything out of this, or am I just like spending 1,000 hours a year on something that doesn't actually matter? And so this was a spontaneous realization of like, oh my God, like this is how I am now, and it's in a good way, in a really good way. Like I get so much out of this, and it's made me so much happier. And so immediately I just felt so much gratitude, like for this practice and for this meditation. And now once more, here I am trying to spread it. So, if you're ever curious about Vipassana courses and retreats and stuff, please reach out to me or another meditator, or just figure it out for yourself. But do it, though. Do it. Come and see for yourself. Ehipassiko. You must, because as I've said many times in this video by now, you can read about it, you can hear about it, but that is not the same as experiencing it. And the only way to truly understand what I'm talking about here is to go and experience it for yourself. And I really hope that anybody who watches this or interacts with me or whatever it is, experiences what I feel, because I've begun to feel much more peaceful and much more happy and grateful for all those things, of course. And I've come to know peace within myself. It's not an intellectual game. It's not just reading about it. Oh, you're so abundant, just reading on a page. No, experientially, I've come to know this peace and this harmony and this love for everyone, especially for those who are closest to me, of course, but for all people. And so that's kind of how I try to live my life now, not because I'm like trying to get something out of it, but just because I want to. I want to now, which is cool to like think about, because it's like, oh, I've really come a long way. That's all I can say. Anyway, so that was day 7. I mentioned the thing about dissolution. I mentioned the thing about crying. The other thing I wanted to mention, and then we'll wrap up, is day 10 is Metta Day. And so Metta translates to loving kindness. And that's a nice transition, actually, because one thing that naturally happens is you purify the mind on a deeper level, which again is the aim of this technique. One thing that naturally happens is compassion starts to arise, because you start to realize on the experiential level, I have been hurting myself for so long, and it always just spreads, and it just spreads and spreads and spreads, and you realize then that everyone has always been doing this, and compassion arises because you also recognize that this process just hurts. It leads to suffering, it leads to our own misery, and it leads to the misery of others. And people are ignorant to it, but we're the first victims of our own negativity and of our own ignorance. And so, people just wanting to be right in arguments, and people just get riled up and agitated in a million different ways, but then they just pay it forward without realizing that what by paying it forward, they're hurting themselves more than anyone else. Of course, they're hurting others too, and then those others will hurt others, and in the process hurt themselves. And then those, it just spreads and spreads and spreads. Very bad. Very bad. And so compassion arises because you realize that this is what you've been doing. And you realize that now I must change that. I must only give compassion to others. I must not pay forward negativity, but just compassion, just goodwill, because then that will spread, and some people will feel compassion from me, and then they'll cultivate compassion in themselves, and then they'll pay forward compassion, but once more, they're the first people to gain the benefit of doing that, and it will really help them. And then those people who have now received this compassion, they feel nice, yes, very good, but they make a determination to spread more compassion. And then they receive, and so it's like, the point is, you start to realize what you put out into the world isn't just about you, but it's about everyone, okay? And it just goes and goes and goes and spreads and spreads and spreads. If we ever want to make a perfect world, we have to start with ourselves, and in doing so, but when you do purify yourself, the wish to help others just naturally gets a lot stronger. I explained that in a strange way, but we're going to go with it. In any case, day 10 is Metta Day. Loving kindness is the translation of Metta. And so this is when the silence is broken. Again, this is my third course, so I've been through it before. I know what Metta Day is like and stuff. It was really good, actually, because on previous courses, I've been kind of agitated on day 10 because the silence breaks and the quality of your meditation starts kind of coming down a little bit. After 9 days of very intense, serious meditation in total silence, you're meditating at a pretty intense level. The instant you start talking, your meditation kind of comes down a bit. It's like I'm just going to use the analogy. It's like kind of coming down from a drug or whatever it is. It's like the intensity is, you're turning it back down. And so in the past, I've been agitated about that because it's like, I want my good meditation, I want to experience deep sensations and insights and all that stuff, which is great. It's fun to do. But I think because I had been practicing daily, it was like, let's turn down the level a bit. It more or less just felt like daily practice, another day of meditation in my life. Feels like every day, and that's a beautiful thing, and that's what I liked about Metta Day. And so you're surrounded by this community of people who've also been through this really powerful experience and who are generating compassion themselves, and everyone is just very, very friendly. Everyone is very, very, very friendly and very sweet, and the community of meditators, very, very good people, very, very good people. And on that day 10, it's like everyone is still feeling so good, especially to just be talking once more. And my thought is always, I want to meet everyone, I want to talk to everyone. And I'm usually a pretty introverted person, not super introverted, but I'm pretty introverted. And it's fun to feel like, I want to talk to everybody. I don't usually feel that way. In any case. So I talked to a bunch of people and just kind of got back to my daily life. So the first metta that you do is after the 8 to 9 meditation. There's 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And so then there's a loving kindness meditation at the end of that. And so this was the second time that I cried a bunch for... spoiler alert. Because you go from this inner work that's been really intense for a while, you're still at this place very deep inside yourself. And so now you try to fill from the inside out, from this deep place outward, you try to fill it with compassion. And so I began the loving kindness meditation, going through it, and I could feel so much love, more love than I've ever felt in my entire life. maybe even combined, just flowing through me and in this weird but such comforting way. And it reminded me just that going through all this stuff, which was so painful, and which again, you don't even realize why you're doing it sometimes. Self-doubt is a big thing. Negativity just evaporating off of you in a very painful way. You go through it, and then on the other side you realize and you remember why you go through it. Kind of like I was just saying a few minutes ago. I remembered kind of why I do this, and there was so much love for others, and at that moment there was so much love for myself, for being willing to sit through all this, because I know it's hard, I've been there. and so often it's like, why the heck am I even doing this? Like, this sucks. It really does a lot of the time. It really does. But then eventually you remember why you do it, and sure, it's great to pay it forward, but the primary person that you're working for is yourself. And in that moment I realized, like, oh shit, like, all this stuff I've been through, and that I go through, and that I will go through, even if I don't reflect on it, and even if I don't realize it as I'm doing it, it's for my own well-being. And it's a testament to the fact that I actually do care and love about myself, which again is something that I often doubt. It's so easy to get wrapped up in the negativity, but then it just takes a moment of that purity, of that pure-mindedness, and of that remembering that you realize, no, this is all to come into deeper harmony with my own self, and to live peacefully and happily, and to sort of earn that happiness. Because I'd be the first person to tell you that I don't always feel worthy of, positive feelings, emotions, people even, Worthiness is something that definitely I struggle with. And I would say most of the people in my family struggle with, but most of the people I know struggle with, and people who take it for granted aren't any better, so I'm glad they don't have to deal with it, but I wouldn't say they're better off. What I'm talking about here is just a very deep experience of, no, I am worthy, and I've really pushed myself to work to get to this place of joy that I'm now experiencing so deeply. And in that moment it was so intense. And so when the meditation ended, I just gave myself the biggest hug, just deeply hugging myself, and I just sat there crying for like half an hour. I couldn't even freaking stop crying, because it was like all of a sudden I remembered, damn, I love myself, on the experiential level, not just thinking about it or wanting to or intellectualizing. No, I was experiencing my love for myself in a very, very powerful way, and that's why I just cried in a very good way, though. It was like tears of joy, because there was also gratitude. It was like, thank you for doing what you have done to me saying that to myself, because somewhere deep down I know that this is good for me, even though it is hard, and that I'm getting a lot out of it, even though it is hard, and even though it maybe seems unnatural, or because it's not the kind of thing that people just randomly do in our society, So this deep experience of my own love for myself and for others, of course, coming back to the central point here, what you experience deep within yourself, very deep within yourself, is what comes to the surface. It colors everything, so if you're very pure deep down, no matter what happens on the surface level, you'll still retain your purity. And if you're very agitated deep down, no matter what happens on the surface, you'll always be very agitated. and how you interact with other people. There's a great quote from Ram Dass. He says, "In every moment you are a full statement of your being." And so it just naturally spreads. If you're a very positive person, it naturally spreads. If you're a very negative person, it naturally spreads. So you must be very, very careful, my friends. You must be very, very careful, because it's easy to pick stuff up from other people and then react to it and generate negativity. But it's our job to be diligent and vigilant and, ardent about not generating new negativity. Once we realize just how much it hurts ourselves and how much it hurts others, we have to be really, really determined to stop doing that and to come out of these old habits. Okay, and that's the end of the retreat. That's day 10. I'm going to very briefly just mention, no, I don't even need to mention it. Well, I'll mention. So I was like kind of floating, I was like, I'm slowly making my way down to Denver now that the retreat is over, but I kind of have as much time as I need or want. So I talked to the staff and I was like, hey, can I stay an extra day, just volunteer, do whatever you guys need me to do? And they were like, yeah, sure, come hang out. So I stayed an extra day and volunteered. I really love to serve. I've come to find so much joy in service through Vipassana specifically. And so I worked at the center for another day. And the project that they had me doing was digging these really deep holes, like 2 foot deep holes. You can't even see both my hands. 2 foot deep holes, which is big, And they wanted 6 of them. And to start the hole, I was sledgehammering through concrete too to make things more fun. And I don't know if you can see, but I still have a blister almost 2 weeks later on my hand because just of all the shoveling and the sledgehammering and the pickaxing and oh man, that was a good workout. That's all I can say. I dug 3 holes that day, and someone had previously done 2, so there was only 1 to be done after I left. Challenging hole digging. The other thing they had me do was to move this huge pile of wood for the building, maybe 50 feet. So I was picking up large pieces of wood and transporting them. Very physical work, but it was nice. It was nice because I was there with a couple other meditators and we were just hanging out. Some of the really experienced people, I got to talk to them and pick their brains a bit, and we just hung out, Whenever you're around other meditators, just have a good time. You just always have a good time. The people are great, and it doesn't even, even if you don't agree on everything, no one is so reactive that you would get mad or and what I'm getting at here is Sangha. So the meaning of the word, so there's 3 things that you take refuge in: Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Buddha, you're taking refuge in the qualities of Buddha, the quality of enlightenment, the seed for which exists in all people, and you're taking refuge in your own Buddha within you, essentially. Dhamma, I've explained, it's the path, the way to liberate oneself. Sangha is the 3rd thing that you take refuge in, and so the meaning of the word Sangha is sort of the community of saintly people. So it's other meditators like yourself, and you just spend time, and so you draw inspiration from other meditators like yourself. These don't have to be liberated people. You just draw strength from the fact that other people are working too, and you can just be inspired by the person sitting next to you. That's one other thing I should mention. On Metta Day, everyone was coming up to me and they were like, "Oh, you were that guy that was always sitting statue Buddha the whole time." Because one thing on this course that I've learned on previous courses is it's all in your head, all the pain, all the struggle. And so if you can get through the part that's in your head, you're set. So what I would do is I would take very, very short breaks, and I'd always just get right back into the meditation hall, get back to my little seat and start meditating again, And so because of that, other people, I think, noticed. And they were like, "Oh, this guy's always freaking here before everyone else and meditating and stuff," which is funny. But The point is, though, they can draw inspiration from me that way. They can understand that I'm also working and that I'm also, just doing my meditation. The only reason I do that is because on my last course, my second course, there was a guy in the front row doing the exact same thing. It's like he would take very short breaks, and whenever I got into the meditation hall, he'd be sitting down, way ahead of me, already started meditating and stuff. It's all in your head. Okay, taking an extra 5 minutes on a break does not help you. Taking an extra 5 minutes in meditation might help you. I don't know, maybe a bit. Anyway, that's Sangha for you. And so hanging out with the Sangha at the meditation center and just a few other meditators was really nice. It's really nice. Because you can draw so much inspiration from these people. The other thing I didn't mention, and then I will seriously wrap up, there was one thing I didn't mention, was just the extent of fear that was arising for me on this course. Particularly when I was dissolving my ego, literally within the framework of my body. I was, in this blissful state of subtle vibrations during meditation. That's what would happen. But I began to notice in between meditations, I was full of fear. And so that's part of why I would go in so quickly and just get started. Just don't give any validity to the fear. Don't strengthen the fear by acting on it. And so I knew that once I would get into the meditation, my ego would be under barrage, essentially. Like, I was really messing with, it's like being at war with your ego, and I was kicking its butt. It was great. But when I'm not meditating, it knows that, and it resists it, and it starts to resist the meditation. And so much fear would arise between meditations. It would try to stop me from meditating and be, take a longer break, you don't want to go in there, oh, don't make me meditate, please, that sort of thing. And so I tried to keep it down, I tried to just meditate anyway. But there was so much fear coming up. And even when I would meditate a couple times, it would come out, and really, really, really painful experience. So I'm going to conclude here, and what I'm going to say is, similarly, that fear may exist for you. And I will just say, don't let it stop you, because at the end of the day, by meditating or just doing mindfully any activity that you love, you will progress spiritually, and you will begin to experience wisdom within yourself. And the only way to do that is to do the work. And people fear doing the work. And so you can't let that fear stop you, because then you will be stuck forever. I know this experientially. Because before I started meditating, I was just going downhill. And then once I did start meditating, even somewhat casually at first, my life has been getting better ever since. Like, I can literally identify the worst day of my life, and it was probably right around when I was introduced to meditation, about 5 days before, and I was so stuck, I was so stuck, and the advice that was given to me is from my therapist, and I brought to him this existential crisis. I've told this story before, perhaps you've heard it, perhaps you haven't, doesn't matter. I brought this existential crisis to my therapist. I was like, oh, nothing matters, we're all gonna die, materialism sucks, etc., etc. And then I said, I'm sorry for bringing this up, because I know this affects you too. And he said, don't worry about it. And he explained to me, it's a hole that you can find yourself in. When you're in a hole, it's dark, it's scary, it doesn't make any sense. But you can look up and you can say, oh, maybe I can climb out of this hole somehow. And what you need is a way to climb out of the holes. We all get stuck down there sometimes. It happens. What you need is like a ladder. And so he explained to me, don't be sorry for bringing this up. I have a ladder. And I was like, what's this? How do you go about climbing out of holes, man? And he told me, I meditate. And so that conversation changed my life, because I was like, tell me more. And, a year and a half later, I found myself on my first course. I began to meditate later that month. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I began, and my life has been getting better ever since. And I will forever be grateful to Dennis for that. So thank you. So yeah, that's kind of it. Yeah, so don't let fear stop you, because if you're stuck, fear will keep you stuck. And that's not a place you want to be, and really takes its toll on you. And you know probably better than I do what your misery is like. So, but this is a way that people can really heal themselves, and that I think everyone should do, and that everyone would get a lot out of. Now, I understand that not everyone is going to, but nonetheless, everyone would benefit so much from it, whether they know it or not. And so I really hope that it spreads, and I hope that this video serves you, and I hope that you progress on the spiritual path. Feel free to reach out if you want to reach out or have any questions or just want to say hi, whatever. I'm here. But yeah, with that, I'm gonna say, yeah, be happy. Please be happy for yourself and for all others.